to go to a panel that we have of Democrat, Republican, Conservative, Liberal in Washington, D.C. And we have joining us in Washington two people who I've not met before, but would have a terrific reputation, each of them. Ford O'Connell, who's the chairman of Civic Forum PAC, and he's the co-founder of Project Virginia, and Kelly Bingel, who's a Democratic strategist and partner of Melman, Vogel, and Castanetti, a consulting firm in Washington. So let me ask you about because the Libya situation, which I know you guys are eager to talk about, has so many implications and so many aspects to it. We've just heard from Catherine Herridge talking about the weapons part of it, what may happen to them next. But we also have a huge political element of this, political in the United States and in Europe, but certainly for President Obama. Kelly, tell us, do you think this is another bin Laden takedown, President Obama leading from behind and being vindicated in the approach that he's taken, which has been controversial within his own party and within the Republican Party? What do you think, Kelly?
Well, KT, I mean, I think we can all agree that this is yet one dictator who's coming out of power under an Obama administration. So if I were in the Obama administration, I would certainly be positioning the administration to take credit for this. I mean, bin Laden and now it looks like Gaddafi out of power under an Obama administration should be defined as a win by the folks in the White House. Catherine made some very good points about what happens to the weapons that are now sort of out there in Libya, and that question remains to be resolved. But at this point, it certainly looks like a victory for President Obama.
Okay, Ford, I want to pivot to you. There seems to be kind of a civil war going on in the Republican Party where you have one of the presidential candidates, Michelle Bachmann, having been against the Libya raid, the Libyan war. She came out yesterday with some comments, saying that we hope Gaddafi was gone, but she did acknowledge she was against the Libyan operation. And yet, on the other hand, you have someone like Senator McCain having urged even more action earlier and more significantly. What's going on in the good old Republican Party?
Well, I think we're caught a little bit because we're stretched out across three wars. I think that's a big thing right now. And the number one issue for most Americans is jobs and the economy. That said, if we do get Gaddafi and the weapons, it is a little bit of a victory for President Obama. That said, though, it does not change the fact that his job approval ratings hovering in the high 30s, low 40s, and 26% of Americans are not happy, or his economic rating is about 26%, according to Gallup. So unless he can tie this to jobs and the economy, I don't see this as a major victory for the Obama administration.
Kelly, do you think that foreign policy at all is going to be a big issue in the campaign? We've just heard Ford just says it's going to be jobs, jobs, jobs. What do you think?
Right. I agree with Ford that this election, I think at this point, it does appear to be all about the economy. And as most people have been doing this summer, I've been driving around a lot on vacation, visiting various relatives, and it's very hard to find someone who doesn't have a relative looking for a job or concerned about their job security. So that's going to be the issue of this presidency. Certainly, President Obama's approval ratings seem to be tied to the unemployment numbers. Those numbers have not moved up as well as any of us as Americans would like to see them. But, we're still a year and a half out. I think, if we see some uptick in jobs and some economic improvement there, I think President Obama certainly has a path to victory. But I agree with Ford. It's going to be an election about the economy, less so about foreign policy, unless something new develops in the next year and a half.
Let me add one more thing onto what Kelly's saying, and that is, depending on what happens with this nation-building effort and how much the sort of UN and NATO sticks us with a bill on this, that could affect the debt. And again, those who are in the unemployment line or those who are seeking jobs are not really concerned what's going on thousands of miles away, though it is a good thing to always push for freedom and democracy where we can.
Ford, let me get to follow on to that. As you said, we're overstretched, three wars going on right now. Can you see a Republican candidate emerging challenging President Obama, in effect, from the left, like Richard Nixon did to LBJ before either of them, where you have an anti-war Republican candidate who says, we're stretched too thin, what are we doing overseas, we need jobs at home, bring the boys home, spend at home. What do you think, Ford?
Well, I think that most Republicans are pro-military, and we want to support the military any way we can, even when we're at war. So being anti-military and anti-war is not always the best thing for any candidate, particularly on the right side of the aisle.
Okay, Kelly, what do you think? I know. Let's get some advice to the Republican candidates here.
I was telling Ford in the green room, I'm not a biting Democrat, but let's not forget that 2 of these wars were started before President Obama ever came in. So to see a Republican now come in and criticize our military interventions in those countries, I don't think we're going to see that happening. President Obama is finishing up some things in the foreign policy arena that were started well before he ever came into the White House.
Okay, so do you think, Kelly, that just to take that a step further, does President Obama need to have these wars be over by Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya either be over or be so successful that he can claim all 3 as victories, Kelly, even though started by the other guy?
I think sadly for many folks in our military, many people in America have forgotten all about Afghanistan and Iraq, and I think it's a very sad commentary on the public consciousness that folks are not focused as much on what's going on outside of our country. But as Ford pointed out, people are very focused on their pocketbooks right now and less concerned about the foreign policy arena, and many people don't think about the fact that we're still at war in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Okay, Ford, let me ask you, Ford, if the economy doesn't improve, we're talking about the things that both of you have talked about are big issues for the country, and yet President Obama has foreign policy success under his belt. Bin Laden, let's say he does have success in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya. Does then all of a sudden President Obama run on his foreign policy credentials? What do you think, Ford?
Well, I think for him, should things pan out well and things, improve in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we do get Gaddafi and we do get the weapons, it is definitely something to tout. But at the end of the day, we're looking at a very tight election in about a handful of battleground states where the unemployment rate is far higher than the national average. And frankly, at the end of the day, all people want to do is how are we going to get people working again? And I think the Obama administration recognizes that, yes, it could be something important to tout and maybe a decider in a really tight election. But again, it's still jobs in the economy. And Team Obama knows that. They want to talk about anything other than jobs in the economy, and I don't blame them.
Okay. Let me, I know that, let me go and take a slightly different tack on this, and let's have a lightning round of what do you think is going to happen in other issues, not just the war, the president's standing, leading from behind policies, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think the super committee is going to do? Kelly, do you think they'll come up with something, or are we going to have mandatory cuts?
Well, KT, I think at the end of the day, we're going to have mandatory cuts, and here's why I think that. We've had 2 committees already talking about looking at the debt and the deficit and what we need to do about the problem. Each of those committees have come up with great ideas, which Congress failed to act on. I think even if the committee comes out with a decision by November 23rd and a recommendation to Congress, I don't see any way that it passes Congress by December 23rd, that next deadline, because our last few Congresses seem to have there are folks within each side of the party who are just unwilling to compromise. And so I think at the end of the day, that these 12 folks who are very good people, very well-meaning people, may come up with a plan that they present to Congress, but I don't see it coming out of Congress by December 23rd, going to the president for a signature. I think we're going to see across-the-board cuts. Okay.
Now, Ford, Kelly's basically given you 2 questions to answer. 1, do you think that the super committee will come up with a deal? And 2, even if they do, will both houses of Congress pass it? What do you think?
Well, I'm leaning towards mandatory cuts. I'm hoping for something better. I think a real key here is how much the sort of credit agencies are going to lean on us and whether our outlook's going to continue to be negative. Obviously, S&P's just had someone step down, but at the end of the day, should our negative outlook continue, I think they're going to have to do a lot more than mandatory cuts, or both parties, are going to be on the line here, particularly with what we need to pick up in the Senate on the GOP side and what the Democrats want to target in the House.
Okay, Kelly? If you were a betting woman today, would you say the president is going to own this economy, or the Tea Party Republicans who the president will say, they stood in the way of improving the economy? Who owns it? Anybody?
I think House Republicans are going to own this economy, and here's why. Twice the president has come to the table and offered deals, and they've passed. This time around, as I said, I don't think that there will be a deal, and I think that the president will be able to say, look, I was ready to make some tough decisions, and Congress was incapable of doing it. So I think at the end of the day, the House Republicans are going to own this economy and not President Obama.
Now, Ford, I think you probably disagree, right?
I completely disagree. I don't know how we own 1/3 of the government. I don't understand how we responsible for that. But that said, I do think the buck's going to, stop with the president. I think he's recognizing that, and I think that that's why he's going to come out here and try to make a jobs plan speech, because he recognizes at the end of the day, regardless of what the Tea Party and what House Republicans are perceived to do on the left side of the aisle, he knows very clearly that the American public at the end of the day is going to hold him accountable.
Okay, I'm going to ask you each one question, and you're allowed to give me one word answer. Kelly, are the Republicans going to hold the House? Yes or no?
Yes.
Are the Republicans going to take the Senate? Yes or no?
No.
The Republicans going to win the White House? Yes or no?
No.
Okay, Ford, same three questions. Are the Republicans going to keep the House? Yes or no?
Yes.
Are they going to take the Senate?
About a 70% chance, yes.
Wow, okay, take the White House.
If we put the right combined ticket together, both at the presidency and at the vice presidency, you can bet it, because I hate to say it, the economy is not going to get better, unfortunately. It may only get worse. And what we need to have is strong leadership in the White House. And between Mitt Romney and Rick Perry, it could happen, particularly if they pick a Hispanic candidate as vice president.
Okay, well, I want to thank you both for an extremely civilized and well-informed debate. We have Ford O'Connell, chairman of the Civic Forum PAC, and Kelly Bingel, Democratic strategist and partner at Melman Vogel. Thank you both for joining us.